Welcome to CS 284. I am your instructor Robert McMillen, and we're going to talk about Module 8 this time, which covers Chapter 8 in our book. And we're going to talk about wireless. So wireless was ratified with several different versions by the IEEE. There's the 802.11 basically is the standard, and they have various different versions of wireless. It started with A, then went to B, G, N, and now AC is the latest one. And A has been through a couple of revisions. It started out at 2 megabits, and now it's at a much faster speed. B was always at 11 megabits. G was anywhere from 50 to 60 or 75 megabits, although some went to 100. N went around 150 to 300 megabits, and then AC goes up from there to a potential gigabit. I'm sorry, the other ones were megabits. This one goes to a gigabit connection. So each one is a different speed, runs at a different gigahertz. Some run at in the 2 gigahertz range, and others run in the 5 gigahertz range. You required a network interface card adapter on the client, and it requires an access point connected to a network switch. So basically the device has to have a wireless network interface card on it, and then it needs someplace to connect to, someplace with a radio receiver and transmitter, and that is considered the access point. Now, some access points are also routers. Others are just access points that are basically run at the switch level or data link level. And it just depends on what you need. If you already have a router in your network, then you'll want to get an access point. If you don't, then you'll want to get the wireless router with the access point built in. And some devices you can just choose from a drop-down list what type of device you want it to be. Do you want it to act like a router or act like an access point? So you've also got another type of wireless out there, which is Bluetooth, and it's somewhat different than Wi-Fi. Bluetooth uses is called a PAN, personal area network type of device. It's ad hoc, which means that there's no centralized communication. It's just one device to another device, similar to like a work group would be in a Windows network, where all devices are equal. So ad hoc connections directly to the computing devices using RF transmissions, so radio frequency transmissions. And there's a couple of different technologies out there, the PicoNet and the apparatus. That's not as important to the consumer, but there are a couple of vulnerability attacks that you need to be aware of. There's bluejacking and blue snarfing. Now, bluejacking is more of an annoying type of thing, and that's where people will send annoying messages or pictures or texts to your device based on whatever your device is. It won't typically cause any kind of damage, it's just really annoying, especially if it's a lot of advertising or types of images you don't want to see. Blue snarfing is definitely a lot different. It finds a way to connect to your device, and it can take control of your device either by guessing a password. Most passwords nowadays on a Bluetooth are either 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, or no password at all. The higher end Bluetooth devices actually allow for a much higher type of password that requires upper and lower case as well as numbers. And so those devices are a lot more protected. But most devices nowadays are just not using any kind of protection. So you just become vulnerable to this blue snarfing type of attack, which can take control of your device or at the very least listen in on your conversations. So let's go back to Wi-Fi again. And there's multiple different types of security methods. There's beaconing, which basically broadcasts your SSID that says this is the name of my access point so you can connect to it. You can turn beaconing off so it doesn't broadcast that information, although it is still not a great secure method for securing your wireless network, because there are ways of determining what the SSID even with beaconing turned off. Encryption based, you want to make sure that the transmission of your data is encrypted, and that is a security method. By default, some devices come encrypted and some devices do not. Just depends on when you bought it and what model you bought and that kind of thing. So older D-Link devices and Linksys devices came with the encryption turned off, but the newer devices come with the encryption automatically turned on. But there's still other devices where it still comes with the encryption turned off. And the encryption could be a pre-shared key or it could be certificate-based. So the pre-shared key, of course, is not as safe because it can be deduced. Certificate-based is more secure unless somebody gets a hold of your private key, and then they'll be able to decrypt those messages. Another security method is the MAC address way, where you filter by MAC address. We'll talk about a little bit more here. So the different types of encryption that are out there, there's WEP, that's Wired Equivalency Protocol. That's the older protocol that's out there. There's a couple of different encryptions, there's 64 and 128-bit. The downside to WEP is they use static keys. So once you type in your key, it's sort of a pre-shared key that you type in, and it could be hexadecimal, so it could be letters A through F and numbers 0 through 9. The 64 key is just 10 characters and the 128 key is 26 characters. So the 128 does offer more security, but not by a lot because these keys are static. And because they're static, they are vulnerable to various different types of programs out there that can listen to the traffic for a certain amount of time, and then it can deduce what the password is. So there's a product called AirSnort which does this, as well as many others. So WPA is a little bit better. It does use pre-shared keys just like WEP does, but it also uses TKIP for backwards compatibility for WEP devices. So in case you still have some older WEP devices, still does that. But it also uses rotating keys, which adds to the security. And rotating keys, basically, instead of the static keys, it uses these keys that rotate every 60 seconds or 2 minutes, depending on what it is. You still use the pre-shared key to type in just as you do with WEP, but then the public and private keys do rotate internally, so if somebody does deduce the password, they won't know it for very long. Well, since WPA has become broken by hackers with more sophisticated computers, WPA2 came out, and it also uses PSK, as a pre-shared key, as an option. But you could use a certificate as well. It is not backwards compatible, does not use TKIP like WPA does, but it does allow for certificates for a higher encryption, and of course it does use the rotating keys as well. So WPA2 using certificates, different from pre-shared key because it requires a third-party certificate that validates the user's device. A certificate must be installed on the access point and the device. So both devices will send the public keys back and forth and use the private keys to encrypt and decrypt the information. It does offer a lot better security than a pre-shared key. So another one we touched on earlier was the MAC address filtering, and it uses the hardware address on the network interface card, which all interface cards have, whether they are wired or wireless, and it offers additional security because with pre-shared key, because MAC addresses, they have to be known and registered by the access point before attaching to the network. So basically what you do is you find out what your MAC address is on your computer or your device, and one way to do that is to pull up a command prompt, and you can type ipconfig/all, and on other devices that are not Windows you can go into the network settings to find this information, and then you can see the physical address right here, which is your MAC address. So you type that into your access point, and that is your registered MAC address, so it knows you as well as your pre-shared key for additional security. Still not as secure as an encryption, but it's better than using just one or the other. So other security measures that you can use, dampeners. These devices block wireless signals from exiting the building to prevent war driving. War driving, of course, is people that drive by looking for vulnerable access points. So if you have a dampener, it allows the wireless signals inside the building, but it won't let them outside because it blocks those signals from exiting the building, making it a lot more difficult to hack. You can also have time limits, so when the business is not open, you can turn access to the access point off. So this type of thing prevents issues when you're after hours. Nobody can just drive up to the building and start hacking because, hey, the wireless is turned off, can't be accessed. Monitoring devices. These devices can monitor and update administrators who is accessing the wireless network. So if you have a monitoring device, some of them are built into the access points themselves. Others are just third-party products. And you can see who is attached to the access point and sending wireless traffic back and forth. So if you see a device in that list that you don't recognize, then you know that you've been compromised at that point. You can take further action. So we talked about Wi-Fi standards, Bluetooth and Bluetooth security and hacks, Wi-Fi security, encryption certificates, MAC address registration, and other security measures. And that concludes our Module 8 discussion.